There is something that your daddy and I...
There's something that Mummy and me want to...
We want to talk to you about. It's a bit serious, though.
What's happened to my underwear?
Oh, I literally have no idea.
So sorry, but do we know?
Hola, buenos días. Bienvenidos a la rueda de prensa de presentación de la película de clausura de esta edición del festival, una película que, como sabéis, está programada en la sección oficial fuera de competición. Se trata de We Live in Time, Vivir el momento, título en castellano. Y para presentarla contamos con su director, John Crowley, y con su actor protagonista, Andrew Garfield. Vamos a abrir directamente el turno de preguntas, que sois muchos. Aquí hay una primera pregunta.
Hi, well, first of all, congratulations for the film to both of you. I have a question for Andrew. Yesterday, during the conversation that took place and where both of you and also Nick were talking about the film, a lovely conversation, by the way, you mentioned that you were through a process in which you want to step aside and just focus on yourself, but when receiving this script, it felt like part of that process, not just work. So I want to ask you, what has been the best lesson you have learned from Tobias, from your character, during this process? Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, for the question. Can you guys hear me? Do I have to push this? No? Oh, no, now you can hear me. It says push, but push if you don't want to be heard, I suppose. So anyway, so I think... I'm just kidding. Thank you for the question. It's a great question, and I think maybe the main thing that I learned, which is a lesson that I think I've learned in my life over and over and over again, and I still haven't quite fully absorbed it, is that the cost of living a full life of meaning and joy and connection and love is very, very great. There has to be a huge cost. There has to be loss. There has to be suffering. There has to be courage. There has to be rejection. There has to be death. There has to be... It's the setup. We can only go as high as we can go deep. And I think I always forget that and have to remember over and over and over again. And Tobias in the film is someone who starts out thinking, believing in a certain cosmology that says, if you stay between the lines and if you do everything exactly right, then you will be rewarded. And he's rewarded with a shitty marriage and divorce. And it's only when he starts to step out of his comfort zone, his sense of safety, that he is in fact rewarded with all of the bountiful magic and awe and beauty that life has to offer. And of course what comes with that is the difficulty and the pain and the suffering. But again, you can't have one without, you can't exile the dark in order to get to the light. There's one way to the light, and it's through the dark, it's down through the dark. So I think that was a wonderful lesson to learn.
Aquí hay una pregunta, el chico de amarillo de aquí. Sí.
Hola, ¿qué hay? Enhorabuena por la película, la verdad es que es magnífica. Quería preguntar a John sobre el montaje, porque esta película podría ser una que ya hemos visto antes, sin embargo, el desorden cronológico creo que la hace bastante especial. Es como un puzzle que hace que los personajes, los vayamos conociendo, no vayamos viendo su relación en desorden. Y también a Andrew, enhorabuena por la interpretación, quería preguntarte cómo ha sido la construcción de los personajes, tanto por tu parte como por la parte de Florence y ambos juntos. Muchas gracias.
Well, it's ostensibly quite a simple story, which is, a guy meets a woman and they fall in love and they try and make a life and have a child, and then it comes to an end. And no spoilers, but but it felt to me that the form which Nick had in his script, which was of 3 time frames, in lots of ways was the meaning, and it also made it essentially cinematic for me, which I'll come on to in a second. It allowed you to show multiple facets of that relationship, almost like a cubist painting or like a diamond, which has lots of facets cut in it, rather than it being linear and having to have the beginning, the middle, and end of every part of the relationship. You were able to drop into different parts of that relationship at its very early stages, at later stages, and to see emotional, physical intimacies contrasting each other, and to see the way in which they handle their own sadnesses, their own fears, so that by the end, the wish was that you would have a complete portrait of a complicated adult relationship, and that it would never the film would never bottom out into being, will they, won't they get together, or how long will she survive, which is sometimes what happens with romantic films or with illness films. They can be quite linear. The director that I thought of a lot when making this, and it's sort of ironic because he never made a film anything like this, he made much darker films, was Nicholas Roeg, right? And he had a great line about that he said, in the editing room, all time is available all the time. And I loved the idea that a film generates its own sort of relative time universe, and that if we could do that with this and capture it, that would be worthwhile. The script was in one shape, and then of course you get into the editing room, and we broke it apart into thousands of pieces and had to almost begin again with the disordering and reordering of it. The performances arrived magnificently as we were shooting, so I went into the editing room with two extraordinary performances. I could see that even in rehearsals, that what was beginning to bubble up was very special. And then in the shooting, about 3 days in, there was even a drop in one of the scenes where it was like, wow, this is exceptional. And the truth of those two performances became our compass, which is how to piece the film together. And it took on its own sort of emotional logic, as it were.
And in terms of creating the relationship with Florence and playing the character, the writing was very good. The script was incredibly good. In the sense that, Nick is a phenomenal playwright, and he's also a phenomenal screenwriter. And I think as far as screenwriting goes, there needs to be room in the writing for the director to create his own, with his or her own imagination, the visual language of the film, and for the actors to create with their own souls and imagination the emotional, lived-in flesh and blood language of these characters. And what Nick did supremely was it's like Shakespeare almost, not to be too hyperbolic, but he created such a strong structure and skeleton of emotional logic and uniqueness within each character and their dynamic, while leaving room for Florence and myself to bring our own creativity, our own imagination, our own spirit and soul and choices to the work. There was no ceiling to it. We could fly from the very strong foundation that he created. And in terms of jumping all over time as well, it felt very, very clear whenever we were acting together where we were, because of the writing and because of Florence and us being able to tune into each other, and creating that dynamic was a great acting joy of my life, and doing it with John, the three of us really creating an environment of safety and intimacy together, and humor and joy, and an ability to drop to those depths of our own humanity and bring all of our own personal material to this piece. It's a testament to John for creating that environment. It's a testament to Florence for being such a fierce, vulnerable, strong, like mysterious, one of those mysterious actors. And I speak for her in saying that she really wishes she could be here. again, mostly because she loves to eat. Secondarily, she loves this film. No, she's very, very proud of this film, and she's dying to be here, but she's filming in New Zealand right now. So she sends her love, and she loves this city, and she loves this festival, and yeah.
Aquí hay una pregunta aquí delante.
Hi, first of all, congratulations on the film. I may have cried a little bit at the ending. I wanted to ask you both about the script, because I think it's been a long time since I've seen a romantic drama on a big screen. It feels like these kind of movies have been long gone from cinema. So I wanted to ask you, what was your first reaction when you received a script like that you might not have received in a long time? And if you think these kind of films are disappearing from movie screens? Thank you.
Okay, this might sound odd. When I first read it, I didn't think, oh, this is a romantic drama. All right, I thought, this is a great story about death, right? It's really fearless, and it's very funny, and it's trying to attain to some of the mystery of what it means to actually fall in love with somebody and have a child with them and make a life with them. And the scene that struck me most forcefully with that was the birth scene, right? That was the one where I was like, oh my God, the whole of this world in Nick's script is laid out in this, and its glory. So I was not aware when I was making it, I wasn't consciously trying to make a romantic film. What I wanted to make was something which was really truthful. It is, of course, very romantic. I'm delighted, because that's because what Andrew and Florence have done, and their degree of chemistry, is a sort of glorious side effect to watching them falling in love and watching them have arguments, watching them do everything, going to that petrol station and go through one of the most difficult moments of their life together, and they still never lose their sense of humor. So I think the romance of it is a beautiful thing that gets thrown up from them trying to make a life together, as it were. Yeah, it's a genre that has fallen out of favor. There was some really wonderful examples out of the UK of it. Richard Curtis made some fantastic versions of it. And I think there was a period maybe after that where some of the material thinned out somewhat. And I suspect people maybe focused on the wrong things and headed straight for the romance. And actually, that's not really the point of it mostly. You want to follow a story and see the ups and downs of something, and hopefully it's beautifully acted and it's truthful. So
Yeah. And I when I read it, I was in deep contemplation of the meaning of life. As always, but maybe more pronounced in that moment. But I was thinking about life, death, love, meaning, time, standing at the age of 39, 40, kind of in the middle, midlife crisis kind of thing. And, looking forward, looking backwards, looking exactly where I am, and going, what now? And having had loss in my life that was new, reshaping my comportment to the world, transforming things in me and creating space for more, hopefully, heart-filled living by breaking the heart open. And I was in that deep contemplation, and then this script arrived, and it was as if I had written it from that place. It felt like, oh, how did I write this so well? I'm not a writer, but it was Nick going through his own version, and I thought, well, if we're both contemplating these things, then there's got to be something to it. There's got to be something universal here in this story. And it felt to me like having an opportunity to leave my living room, if I was a sculptor, and go into my sculpting studio with a bunch of great artists, including John, Florence, Nick, the crew, Stuart, our great DP, and creating something out of clay from the kind of emotional material that I was ruminating in anyway. And it felt just like a way of making something that could have been quite self-indulgent, very generous and generative and for everybody. What a gift as an artist, as a creative person, that depends on collaboration. Like, I can't go into the next door room and create something out of a piece of clay. I have to wait for hundreds of other artists to want to make the same thing, or for me to want to make the same thing as other people. So it kind of occurred like that in such a beautiful way. It feels like the film is about those massive questions that we all face. And when I saw the film with an audience for the first time in Toronto, and I was able to let the film wash over me in a new way because I was with an audience experiencing it for the first time, and I was struck in a couple of moments just by the simplicity of what this film's about, which just witnessing two people who aren't asking for a lot, like all of us, I think. We're not asking for a lot. We're just asking to be here for an opportunity to live and try to make the best of it. It's really quite simple. That's why it feels so kind of beautifully universal. And of course, romance is involved because it's one of the great opportunities of living, is to experience that kind of intimacy and love. Yeah.
Aquí atrás hay una pregunta.
Question here. First of all, this movie is a blast. Thank you very much. John, I know that you've explained that initially you never thought about this film as a romantic drama, but it became a romantic drama, and it was impossible for me not to think about a tradition, especially in UK, from David Lean. And David Lean used it to tell romantic stories, not to talk about romance, but to talk about fear, to talk about his country, his culture. I would like to bring this reference to you to understand not only to which tradition do you think this movie belongs to, but what's the idea of world that you investigated in this story. And to Andrew, if you allow me the question, I think that both characters, they are heroes fighting the disease, fighting fear. What kind of heroism they represent? Thank you very much.
I'll take David Lean. That's good. Yeah, Brief Encounter, you know, one of the great romantic dramas. And you're right. I think that's the point that you've articulated very well, which is I think films which have a profound romance. Casablanca didn't set out to be a romantic drama necessarily. You know, it's sort of, there's other work going on and that gets thrown up. And I think that when you do that, there's space for an audience to find itself in the work, and that really gives it something. I mean, of course, you know, is it in the tradition of David Lean? Yeah, David Lean and Nicholas Roeg. And of course, David Lean fired Nicholas Roeg off Lawrence of Arabia, didn't he, for telling him to fuck off. So there's a good tradition there. So it's somewhere between David Lean and Nicholas Roeg with a little bit of English fuck off thrown in there. It is in the tradition of that. And yeah, I don't mean to be perverse and say it's not romantic. Of course it's romantic. I just was trying to make the point that and this may be a bit of a sensitivity as I was setting out to make the film early on, which is that the only version of the film that I could see working was if it held on to all of its complexity and that we didn't downplay some of the darkness in the film, that it had to have that sort of tension and polarity between the romance and the tenseness of the arguments and the darkness of the illness, and have all of those elements talking to each other, bound together with wonderful wit, which is what Nick had put in there. And if we got all of that, then it would work, because the gesture of the film is open-hearted. It wants to speak to its audience. It's not locking people out with the time structure or with the darker elements in it. It's just trying to do so in a way that hopefully is a bit more playful and a little bit more surprising than some of the later versions of romantic dramas.
And can I address the hero thing?
No.
Oh yeah, sorry. So the hero, I understand the descriptor of these two people could be seen as heroic in that kind of ordinary way. I struggle with that word right now in our culture, and I actually, because anyone in my life who has been through something similar to what Tobias and Alma go through would reject the idea of being heroic, thinking about people in my family, very, very close friends of mine who have been through things of the most horrific nature, losing children, you know, the kind of things where you have to wonder if the universe has any justice in it. Those moments where you kind of think, well, what is this? What is the setup here? And how am I supposed to carry on? And the ones that do find a way to carry on would reject outright the idea of being heroic. It's necessity. There's this strange thing that we all, the majority of us seem to have, which is that, as Tony Kushner says in Angels in America, we live past hope. When we're more spirit than, I forget the line now. I did Angels in America for 2 years and I've forgotten it all. But basically, what I love about these two people is that they represent this strange, mysterious, undying, inexplicable want to live in the face of the most horrific heartache and loss. And how we as human beings find that strength, find that want, find that little flame of longing to live over and over and over again. It's probably happening in this room right now. There are probably people in this room going through something not dissimilar to what these characters are going through and having to face death and choose to live anyway. Particularly, I'm sure in this building, there's at least 5 people going through something as hard. And I find that remarkable, that at any given time, there's a great percentage of us having to decide to carry on living. And that feels to me so deeply inspiring and mysterious. I guess there were a few of you who are experiencing that in the room. I guess I was right.
More than a few.
Hola, buenos días. Yo quería hacer una pregunta a Andrew Garfield. Dada la estructura del guión, con los saltos y demás, tengo curiosidad pues, a la hora de estudiar el guión, el personaje, luego ensayar, si había alguna escena concreta por la que estaba deseando, ya a la hora de rodarla, que no veía el momento de que llegara porque creía que era con la que iba a disfrutar más. Gracias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. Thank you. I got it. Thank you. The birth scene was, you know, same as John. When I read that in the script, I had never seen anything like that in a script before, on screen before. I'm not aware of anything done like that cinematically before. I've never, it took words out of my mouth. I didn't know how to deal with it. And I knew that I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to participate. It felt like an action sequence. It felt like the central action sequence of this, like the Indiana Jones action sequence of this film, including from leaving the house through till having given birth in the ambulance. It felt like the big, you know, the traffic jam and losing Almut in the traffic jam, you know, having to, you know, it all felt like Indiana Jones to me. And then, of course, a person who has never done anything remotely medical before being given the responsibility of the 2 most precious lives in the world at that very moment, in the middle of a very dirty bathroom, as someone who's a clean freak. It's so much to play, and it's so much, and I was surprised by how it felt to me when we were shooting it, like it was so interesting, the shift that happens between giving birth and the delivery. Because I think the giving birth for Tobias in that moment feels very, very dangerous, like there's actually some big mammoth elephant monster inside my wife that I have to protect her from and protect myself from. That's how it started. And then once the birth happened, that big mammoth creature that's going to destroy us shrinks and becomes this little mythical, most magical thing that is suddenly in my care that I have no idea if it's going to slip out of my hands or where. So I think there was, the acting of it was some of the most joyous, most fun, most connected, full of imagination acting I've ever had to do, and playful and sweet and funny and such high stakes. But it's so funny when the highest of stakes can become incredibly funny. And watching it with an audience in Toronto, it felt like, oh yeah, it's a really funny scene, thank God. Because at the time it felt like the most life or death scene you could possibly shoot. And yeah, so we did that over 2 days in a set that was created in a studio in London. And at the end of it, Florence and I didn't want to leave the toilet. We didn't want to leave because it felt like we had conjured so much, and we had a baby in there with us at the end of the second day. We had this 11-day-old baby that was brought in as an actor with us. And that, we thought we were going deep, and then the baby came in and we were like, oh my God. So we didn't want to leave after the final take was done. We just kind of held each other for 20 minutes in that room. It felt like we had created this strange, holy, spiritual cathedral out of this, petrol station toilet. Like something holy had happened there. And it was a very, very beautiful scene to shoot.
¿Hay tiempo para una pregunta más? Aquí?
Sí, considero que es un magnífico broche para un excelente festival, donde curiosamente el tema de la muerte ha comparecido en varios títulos, ¿no? No solo lo ha tratado Almodóvar, también Costa Gabras, Los destellos, Mi verano eterno. La muerte no como tal, sino justamente el paso hacia ella, el no sufrimiento. Y en esta película me ha llamado la atención, Love Story, el clásico romántico de hace medio siglo, el cáncer acaba con la cosa. Y aquí, en cambio, el cáncer lo que hace es dar más textura a la relación amorosa, ¿no? de la pareja. Esto me ha parecido interesantísimo, al igual que, efectivamente, la labor de montaje, ¿no? El dejar que el espectador hiciera el puzzle. Eso me lleva a pensar si el rodaje fue lineal o no. Quiero decir, si los actores sabían qué iba antes y después, o se hizo, imagino que no. Si el rodaje fue lineal en comparación con ese montaje que hace que los flashbacks dejen al espectador interlocucionar, ¿no? Hay que destacar que, claro, lo que podría ser un melodrama lacrimógeno se queda en una reflexión de las tragedias de la vida, de las complejidades, pero que el humor ayuda a hacerlo, ¿no? Y realmente los personajes alejados de todas las convenciones, sobre todo ella, con ese afán de superación y tal, es realmente cautivador. Y la química entre los dos actores también, ¿no? Se ve que la dirección estaba detrás, o sea que enhorabuena.
I think I got the question. Thank you. I'm very happy you liked the film. It was not shot in a linear fashion. And of course, the actors knew everything. We rehearsed for 2 weeks, so the script was very tightly written, and every scene, what Nick, he started in the theatre, so his scenes are impeccable, so they have a beautiful shape to them. Justine Wright, who's the marvelous editor, then had a very different job when all that material came into the editing room, which was to then make the cinematic, emotional sense of it. So the scene that was at the very start of the script is now 3/4 of the way through, and the scene that was at the very end of the script is now halfway through. So it started breaking up and breaking around. To your point about the humor, yes, that's true, that for me, humor is almost like a heat shield. It allows you to get closer to something darker, and it stops the film ever becoming, hopefully, too earnest or too lost in its own sense of importance, that there's a sort of absurdity to the situation all the time. But, you know, in terms of just to go back, shooting order once more, no, we had to, well, for a start, there's the head shaving scene, right? So that had to happen in the middle of the shoot for obvious reasons. So she had hair before, no hair afterwards. So that began to determine everything. And then you begin to cluster scenes around. You know, our crew and my first AD did a brilliant job in trying to look after the actors' heads in the kind of work that would get bunched together. We tried to never have them do more than 2 time frames on one day, so their heads would have a chance to. But I must admit, I don't know if you felt this when we were shooting, that they never felt strained by being able to drop into each constituent bit that we were shooting on the day. You know, they were so clear about what the task was in each scene as we went into it. And then the job of shooting it was, you know, realizing that and opening it up and almost trying to shoot the secret scene behind that scene, which was what the real emotional bubbling to the surface quality of the performances bring. And that was Andrew, Florence, Stuart Bentley, who was mentioned before, and the entire crew wanting that and holding those actors, because the film happens in their eye line.
Yeah, it felt kind of luxurious in a way. We shot for 8 weeks, which isn't a huge amount, but for a film like this, felt like quite a luxury. I think there were a couple of, you know, of the larger set piece scenes where we felt a little bit more under the gun, where there were more characters in the frame, or we were losing a location, or like there were a couple of moments where I felt as an actor, oh gosh, I just wanted one more. But to have that only 2 or 3 times in the course of an 8-week shoot is unheard of, because the rest of the time, because of the preparedness of John, the kind of the container that John set up for us to perform in, and because of Florence's brilliance and preparedness, and that we could very, very quickly identify that we could go deep quite quickly together. It meant that, as John said, from the first take onwards, we were really exploring what was happening underneath rather than finding the scene as we were shooting it. We were given a great head start because of her talent and of her, I don't know, how hard she works, how seriously she takes the work, and a kind of trust that we all found together. So it did feel quite luxurious, scene to scene.
And how hard you work.
Oh yeah, I was there too.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a Andrew Garfield y John Crowley por vuestro trabajo y felicidades por la película, y muchas gracias, compañeros. Un placer acompañaros un año más.
Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you.